Lily, did you get one of these? Okay, all right. So today we are going to cover Genesis chapter 35, but deja vu, anybody heard of this vocabulary before, right? It's something like you feel like you've seen it or been there, but it's not, it's first time for you. But in a way, the reason I chose this as a keyword is that what's going to be happening in today's passage, God comes to Jacob and as if it's like it's first time for him, he's actually addressing him a couple things that he already been through with God. So it's not actually a deja vu, but it's almost like repeating it. But for us, it's like, yeah, that's how it feels like for us. In today's passage, we're going to run into some harsh, hard to hear history of Jacob's family. But I want to explain how this is laid out. It is laid out such a way like sandwich. A sandwich. Sandwich has a two cover bread, right? Front and the back. What's in the middle?
Whatever you want.
Whatever you want, and that is the main thing, right? That is the main meat, whatever the meat you choose. So I know some people like the bread, but sandwich, normally what makes it sandwich is the bread, but also the main thing is what's inside. What is happening is God has narrated the story of Jacob's family. In the front, something about his life and his family's life. And in the back, something about his life and his family's life. It's all about human sinfulness. Sinfulness. Back to back. It's very harsh. It's very hard to hear. And at the center of it is the message that God reminds Jacob what he's supposed to do. And so we're going to cover the center message, but in order for us to understand what's going on, I need to cover both back and front. Okay? So, think about that sandwich methodology of narrating a story. It's a very intentional writing skill that people use, even to modern days. They put sandwich in between and then place the main message at the center. So let's take turn read verses first. Then God said to Jacob, go up to Bethel and settle there and build an altar there to God who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, get rid of the foreign gods you have with you and purify yourselves and change your clothes. Then come, let us go to the Bethel where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress and who has been with me wherever I have gone. So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods they had and the rings in their ears, and Jacob buried them under the oak at Shechem. Then they set out, and the terror of God fell on the towns all around them so that no one pursued them. Jacob and all the people with him came to Luz, that is Bethel, in the land of Canaan. And there he built an altar and he called the place El Bethel because it was their God revealed himself to him when he was fleeing from his brother. Now Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried under the oak outside Bethel, so it was named Elon Bakuth. After Jacob returned from Paddan Aram, God appeared to him again and blessed him. God said to him, your name is Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel. So he named him Israel. And God said to him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and the community of nations will come from you, and kings will be among your descendants. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I also give to you, and I will give this land to your descendants after you. Then God went out from him at the place where he had talked with him. Amen. So Today's passage is chapter 35, basically, where the main story and the end story is. The front story, actually, we didn't cover yet. It's chapter 34 and 33. So I need to start with these two chapters before we begin the main one. As you remember, Jacob had reconciled with his brother Esau last week at the river called Jabbok River, and he named it Peniel. After reconciliation was done, Esau invited him to join him, but he said, no, I want to go my own way to return home. And so Jacob's family, they pursued the path to return home. And so he passed through the Sukkot. It's a place called Sukkot, is actually, it means to put a what do you call it? Chomak. Chomak it's a tent, but not formal tent. It's made out of hut. It's temporary tent. And so we know he stayed there for maybe, I don't know, maybe a few months, whatever. It was temporary. So he passed through there and finally he arrived at a place called Shechem. This Shechem, and even in today's, it is very important strategic location for the Palestinians because it connects north to south all the way and then east to the west. And so people travel through this town called Shechem. And actually later on, when there was a northern Israel kingdom, that Shechem became the first capital of that nation. So you can imagine, oh yeah, that place must have been a very busy and very well-to-do city. When Jacob and his family arrived at this site, some reason Jacob decided to put a tent, which means he wanted to kind of stay there, settle there. But actually, I mean, just putting a tent doesn't mean that he wanted to live there. But what he done is he purchased the land with 100 silver coins. Purchased land. When do you buy land of some city? Well, it's typically in those days because you want to settle there. In those days, let's say if you want to settle here, you will buy a house, right? So this is the place you're going to live. So that's what Jacob did. So clearly we can see Jacob had a clear intention to settle in the Shechem. But actually he already had a destination in mind, right? We know he was traveling to go where? His hometown where his fathers live, right? Right now his father lives in Hebron. And he should be going there, but he didn't. He stayed at the Shechem. Because he was after the life of the city. Whenever that happened, we expect something unhealthy event unfold before eyes of man. One day, his daughter Dinah was very curious about the city, so she went out to check out the city and wanted to experience and fellowship with the people there. Guess what happened? Dinah met a boy, a man actually, prince of the Shechem. So he is actually very well-to-do guy, and probably they were talking, but you guess what happened? She took her into his place and raped her. Okay. And after Shechem done that, and he regret and then realized he feel like he is in love with the girl, so he decided to tell his father to ask Dinah's parents to marry him. So he did that. He went and told his father and sent a messenger to Jacob and say, allow me to marry you, and I will give anything that you ask for. So Jacob heard this, and we don't hear anything about what Jacob's decision was, but actually, unfortunately, all the brothers of Dinah heard this while they were in the field walking. Somehow the rumor got around, and then they heard that Dinah got raped by this boy Shechem. They were furious, so everybody ran to home, and Jacob And then Jacob explained they wanted to marry her. He wanted to marry her, but the brothers said, "No way! This is no way. We don't want to marry our, sister to the Gentile boy who really did, bad, wrong things." Wow, so seems like all the sons of Jacob, they walked out of the front of the Jacob, and they planned a scheme. And they decided to talk to Shechem and said, "Well, we'll allow our sister to marry you as long as you become like us, circumcised." And so he went and convinced them, "You circumcised like all the village men, circumcised like us, then we'll marry you. We'll have dinner, marry you." Shechem apparently seems like he was really in love with her. So he went around and persuaded all the village men, "Yeah, let me marry her, and in order for me to marry her, this is what they're asking. Can you all support me?" He is a leader, well-to-do man in the town, but he also said, well, because they are wealthy, Jacob was pretty wealthy, if they become our families, all his belongings belong to who? Not ours. That was his sales pitch. So all the men in the Shechem, they decided to get circumcised. And they did. On the third day, on the third day is the worst time, according to the Bible here. Shimon and the Levi, the second son and third son of Jacob, and probably some of the people were there too, some of the sons. They went into the village and then they pulled out the sword and they killed all the men. Because the men were hurt and they couldn't move. They literally slaughtered all the men in the city. Can you imagine that? And they didn't stop there. Actually, they steal all the animals and everything, and their children and wives. They turn them into their servants, slaves. Can you imagine? And then now Jacob found all this out, and he fell in terror and fear, and they begin to run away from the city. Run away. So basically, this is the background story of today's passage. That's what's happening. Can you imagine the God's people, especially the people of Israel, going through such things in the city as they are settling in the city? That is unheard of. Can you imagine that? Not even worldly people would do such thing. Jacob, who has experienced such thing, that his sons murdering the whole town people and stealing all their belonging, that just is a terrifying situation. So he's running away. Jacob, man of God, what always happens whenever he's in trouble? So far we learned that whenever he's in trouble, God appears to him. He comes to him all the time. And that is something unfair if you think about it. No matter you have done wrong or not, actually God's people, God take care. Take care, that means ignore your wrongdoing, but he always come and communicate and reveal what has been done wrong. And so God appeared to Jacob, basically. And God said, well, you need to go to the Bethel. So actually, as he's speaking about this, he talks about three different places. He said, you need to go to Bethel where you have met me first time in your life. You recall the story of Jacob, right? He was running away from his brother Esau, right? And when he was running away from it, he was about 2-3 days away from his hometown. He slept in the wilderness, right? He had a stone pillow, and he fell in sleep, and then he had a dream. And in his dream, he saw a ladder, and then the angels climbed up and down, and then God's voice here. Excuse me. And there he heard God's voice first time in his life. And Jacob called that place, the place that he was there is Luz. But he called Bethel. That Bethel is house of God. That's what it means. And God said, go there. Go there. So basically what God is doing is he's challenging Jacob to remember the place that you have met me first time. In that place, he heard voice of God first time in his life. And he made commitment to God saying, I will be your man if you always walk with me and protect me. And God told him to remember and go there. Go there. Jacob right away understood what God is asking. Because Jacob wanted to go back to his hometown, his father's place. But for some reason he stayed in the city called Shechem. But guess what? The city of Shechem is well-to-do city. And he purchased land there. Because that was his long life dream. When he was in Haran, he wanted to own his piece of land of his own, just like his uncle Laban. But he couldn't because Laban was keep cheating him. And so finally at the Shechem, he settled. He was after what? He was after the hills of the world. Just like his name Jacob. And God said, no, you need to go back to Bethel and remember. So that is what we see. God is always telling us to remember that first love we had. And Jacob, that was first love. He fell in love with God. That was first time he heard the voice of God. And that's where he made the first commitment. Whenever we are in trouble, God is asking us to remember that. You know, that time that I came and rescued, that I was there with you, and God challenging Jacob to be there. So, and then God continued to talk about one thing that recently happened. This is very interesting. Actually, he repeat the same thing that had happened in the place called Peniel. That Peniel, the old place name is called Jabbok River. It's where he was wrestled with the angel of God. And because he would not let go of him, angel gave him new name. And said, Jacob, you no longer will be called Jacob, but your new name is Israel. Right? Because you have wrestled with God and man, because you have overcome, you deserve to be called Israel. And God said, you know, he came to Jacob and said, well, Jacob, do you remember that's what had happened? Normally that should be happened like that. But what's happening in today's passage? That's not how it happened. Actually, what happened is God literally repeat the same thing with Jacob. Okay? So he will just tell him that your name is Jacob, but you no longer will be called Jacob, and that your new name is Israel. So as you read this as a reader, you feel like the same story is written twice. But it is not. It is the same thing is happening twice to Jacob. So this is what God is saying. Your name is Jacob, but you no longer will be called Jacob. Your new name is Israel. Now, imagine yourself, you're Jacob. This happened before, several years ago. Same thing happened at the Jabbok River. And God came to you again and say same thing. Your name is Jacob, but that's not your name anymore. Israel is your name. How would you feel about it when that happened? When that is repeating like that to you? Yeah.
I feel like God really means it. Like this is an important point.
Yes. What God is doing to Jacob is, Jacob, your name is actually Israel, but you have been living as Jacob again. Even though so many years back, I have made you Israel, all along the life that you had at this city called Shechem, you are living as a Jacob. You know, the name of Jacob means someone who holds the hills of somebody. It's you have been living, holding on to the heels of this world, instead of being an Israel man who have overcome the wrestle with God. So God is telling him, you're supposed to live as Israel, but all along again, you've been living as Jacob. You are after heels of this world. Jacob understood. Yes?
What is the meaning of Israel?
Israel means, it's like, actual meaning is that God is the victor. But actually what God is explaining to Jacob, he gave Jacob Israel the name because Jacob wrestled with God and he overcame. So when God is explaining to Jacob, that's the reason he gave the name of Israel. And so telling Israel, Jacob saying, you have won this wrestle with me. So many people think Israel means that, he won the wrestle. But actual meaning is actually because God is the victor. And so actually God is declaring that he is the man in charge of this. And so we're supposed to be living as Israel, just like Jacob, overcome all the troubles and wrestles. But Jacob was living as a Jacob. The meaning of Jacob is, again, one who holds the heels of someone. So, Jacob clearly understood what it means. So that's the second thing that God reminded Jacob. The third thing that God reminded him of it is the covenants that took place in the place called Beersheba. This place is, Beersheba is his hometown, his father's hometown, when he was running away from Esau. Because his brother Esau was trying to kill him, basically because Jacob deceived him. And so he was running away. Before he was running away, his father Isaac blessed him. He blessed him with all the covenant that has received from God through Abraham and himself, Isaac. And he blessed him, same covenant to Jacob. So that was the first time God's covenant, the promise, was given to Jacob right before he was running away from hometown. And God reminded him saying, you are a man living according to what? Your own desire? No. Your own selfish reason? No. You are called to live according to covenant of God. Covenant of God. Covenant of God. Jacob understood when he heard this. So he returned to Bethel and he built an altar and made the people, set themselves clean and then changed their clothes and came into the altar and they offered the sacrifice, literally. Pour the oils and they poured also the wines and everything on that stone, and then they made sure that what God has asked them to do, and that's what happened. So, just like in the beginning I have explained it, these three things are the main messages. God is asking Jacob to remember the first place that I have spoken to you. First time I met you. Remember the last time that I have called you as Israel. I have challenged you to live as a victor, overcome the world. And also remember the covenant. You're not living according to your own desire, but the covenant that I have given you. Remember that. But unfortunately, in Jacob's life, what's happening? All the troubles in Shechem, right? The Dinah's, rape and then killing is that all that happened. And then after all this, another story unfolds. Another story is the death come to the beloved family members of Jacob. First one is the Rebecca's nurse. Rebecca's nurse is a slave girl who came to Isaac when she married Isaac, and they came from Haran. And so Jacob and Esau was raised, nurtured by her when they were young. Okay, And so they were like, Deborah is her name, and she's like mom. Nanny, I mean, in today's term, it would be nanny. Yeah, nanny. So, but funny thing is, as he was coming out of Haran, we find her being in the people, in the group of the Jacob's group. So she should be in Rebecca's home right now, but for some reason she is right now with Jacob. Something happened in the middle of the years. So my guess is this: when Jacob married Leah, he had first son, second son, and third son, and fourth son, right? Guess what happened to Leah? Do you remember anything special about Leah? She had a problem with what? Her eyes. She couldn't see. Remember, that was the reason she couldn't get married with anybody else. That's the reason her father, Laban, married her to Jacob. And so can you imagine in the old day, a woman who cannot see and has ended up with 4 children? How do you raise the child? So I believe Rebecca, Jacob's mom, heard this. Jacob had sons, but wives cannot take care. Probably that servant lady traveled all the way to Haran and then care. So what it is this lady is actually raised Jacob when he was young, but also helped him raise Jacob's children later age. So when she passed away, it was so much sadness come to him. And so he cried out. And so that story is kind of written down here because of that reason. In Bible, there's no place, any other place, that there's no one saying anybody wept bitterly because a woman passed away. There's no such place in Bible saying no one cry out because of a woman passed away. This is the only place. It tells us that this lady was that much dear to the heart of Jacob. So she passed away, just like that. And then he buried her under the oak tree and then named it as the crying side of under the oak tree. That's the name of the place that he named it. But that wasn't the end. Jacob's, who was the most favorite lady in Jacob's life? Rachel. Rachel is the second wife, right? She is the most loved one. You know, and when he had to face the issue, she positioned all the family members in the sequence of the favorite, and then the Rachel has been the last one to meet Esau because he didn't want Rachel and Joseph to face Esau early. It was that. But guess what happened to Rachel? While she was having a baby, she had a baby, but she passed away. The baby's name is Benjamin. He is the 12th son of Jacob, but Rachel passed away. Can you imagine? He lost Deborah, now the Rachel, most beloved woman in his life. And all this is happening. The funny thing is actually Jacob did not cry for Rachel. And this actually, the author doesn't really say that. It really doesn't say anything about it. She just buried her, you know. And then when he got to hometown where his father is, guess what was happening? His father Isaac was about 180 years old, and he passed away. It's almost like he's been waiting for his son Jacob to come, as if like the last breath he was holding until he see his son Jacob return. And as soon as he saw, Isaac passed away. All the dear ones, loved one to your heart passed away. What is happening? I personally believe when we experience our loved one passes before our own eyes, that's when we truly become adult and understand life. First, you have to be married. That's one way to become an adult. But the other portion of way to become adult is you lose what you love and care. Most beloved person. And that's what was happening to Jacob. But What God is trying to tell us though, it's not about the death just alone. All along, God's been revealing the history of Jacob's family, all the sinfulness. Dinah's rape being there, and then his children killing people. And another story pop up here at the last part here. His oldest son, Reuben, slept with his concubine, Bilhah. Funny thing about this story is actually Jacob heard of it and story ends. No explanation. This took place and heard it, and then that's it. And then actually story of death of Isaac come. And so I struggle about this whole entire story. The dark story of Jacob's family is just suddenly unfold before our eyes. And it makes it very uncomfortable for us readers. Because we know Jacob has been the man of God. He's the man who lived according to the covenant of God. And then we ask this question, how come? How come? Why is this? And my conclusion is this. Sinfulness of human, man, ourselves. We cannot take care of ourselves. The wage of sin is what? Death. That's all we can see. You see, all the sinful dramas of the family of Jacob, all just, I mean, if I was a writer, I would just hide it. I'll copy, paste, and dump it. Okay? That would be me. But for some reason God revealed all that. It's so hard to read about. And then second part of the story, he starts laying down all the death. All the death. Do you see the intention here? What Arthur is trying to do? See, when he got to the Bethel, there's one peculiar thing that he had done. He poured oil on the stone that he set as he's bringing up the offering to God. That putting on oil to segregate and to make it holy, he done it many years ago, 40 odd years ago, first time when he met God. That's when he did that, he did it with the oil. But this time, he had one special thing that he didn't do before. That it is pouring wine on the stone. What does wine represent?
Blood of
Jesus.
Messiah.
Wow, you guys are very, very quick. You see, that's the first time ever somebody is pouring wine on something to signify the commitment of self, saying that I commit myself with my life. Pour wine. That's the meaning of that, the drama that he plays. Later on, by law, we kill animals to sacrifice the animal blood to cleanse our own self. But what is happening is, as we are doing all this blood sacrifice, what's happening is our sins are covered. This is very important in theology, I want you to remember. Actually, in Old Testament time, as people are sacrificing animals, or the rite as the pouring the wine, it did not wipe away the sin. It did not cleanse the sin the way that we think many times. What is happening is it was covered by the blood. It's almost like all the dirty stuff we pour under the carpet so that no more visible sin. And so that's what's been happening in the Old Testament time. Covered by the blood of animal. So ultimately then, what needs to happen here? How can we confess that our sins no more? How can we say the people in the Old Testament is saved by the blood of the animals? It's because that one high priest, the Messiah, had come And finally, he cleansed everything. All the sins of the old, the past, all the men of Old Testament time, and all the sins of all the men to come, including you and I, and all the future generation. And then their time. So guess what happened? Cleansing of the sin on the surface of the earth and the universe, when did that happen? When Jesus died on the cross. Finally wiped away and cleaned as pure as snow. So this is important. That is the reason Jacob poured the wine. And in all the Old Testament time, no one understood what it means. But now we understand what that means. Their hope of seeing Messiah continued to grow in the story of Old Testament time. Because everybody realized that man cannot save ourselves. Jacob has been, he's the man, patriarch, and he has been a priest. He took all his people and built the altar and went to God. He was a priest, but every part of his history of his life, he couldn't save himself. He could not save his family, his children, the same way. And so that is the message. The core is we need to understand that God exists. He's there, right? And so there must be a place where we meet Him the first time we first fell in love with Him. And there is a special calling for each one of us. He expects you and I to be somebody. Israel. That somebody who can overcome the world. Actually, somebody who believes that God is who is reigning over us. He is the victor. And remember that we live according to not our own desire, self-will, not on our own strength. With what? His covenant, His promise. What's His promise to all of us? That when we have faith in Jesus Christ, that we become children of God. Our sins are forgiven. And that is the covenant. That is the blessing that was promised to Abraham. I'll make you a blessing and then you will be the blessing to all nations. Same blessing came to Isaac. But they always thought for themselves though. Jacob, same way. But we know the entire picture. The covenant is that we all nation, all tribes, all language, we be blessed. Ultimately, the ultimate blessing that God is asking us to receive is the salvation found in Jesus Christ. True blood that's shed for us. The glimpse of that message is hidden in this story of Jacob's life. Jacob, of course, he has been a very faithful man somewhat. But I'm not sure. I don't want to preach to you saying, you better live like a Jacob. I'm not sure anybody wants to live that kind of life. I don't want to. I rather want to live my life. I think my life is better than his life. But one thing, though, what we need to learn is that Jacob remained faithful to God no matter what happened to his life. And that is what we need to hold on. We may experience something that is out of our control. That's something that our children do that I cannot impact and change. Something in my community, something rises dark. But all that is, it reveals who we are. It's hard to swallow, but that's what it is. All the negative and bad things rises in the entire surface of this globe right now. Who's making all this happening? We think somebody else, but we are all part of it because we are a big, happy family and community, if you think about it. And we look to ourselves, we look to our own families. There is a saga story. There's a dramas that we cannot talk about even. Even my family, even some of the family that I know, there is always something that it is unspoken, unrevealed. And it is deeply rooted to the simple nature of man. And Jacob's life, his family's story is nothing more than just revealing that as it is. I wish God kind of deleted it so that we don't get to read about it, we don't feel comfortable about it, uncomfortable about it. But God did reveal it because He wanted to remember who we are. He wants Jacob to remember who he is. And at the end, he said, my life has been what? I had rough life. I don't know how many here sitting is like, probably you'll say, oh, yeah, my life has been rough too. Do you agree that? It's like somewhat, it doesn't matter how well-to-do life is, there's always there's a point in life, it has been rough. My mom always said that. My mom always said, when I had my first baby, I said, I'm just gonna make sure he's done with at least taking milk from her. And then she said, I'm gonna run away. And then the second one came. And then she said, okay, I'll just take care of him a little bit and then run away. And then third one came. And then finally the fourth one came, she gave up. And she had 9 children. I'm the last one. And then, lucky me, I was twin. She had no milk. Yeah. So that's my life and my mom's life. She didn't want to live with my dad. Just first sight love, first sight fear. That was the first time, she saw him after marriage. That's the kind of marriage she had. We all have stories, different, but it is all rooted in the sinfulness of mankind. And the message is clear. Still, I am the victor. God said, I am the victor. Trust me, that is the covenant. I'll be the one saving you. I'll be the one free you. I'll be the one heal you. I'll give you the strength. Don't live as a Jacob. Same as name as your name Jacob. Someone who holds the hills of your brother. Someone who holds the hills of the world. Jacob did the same thing in the middle of the Shechem. He became wealthy, but he forgot the covenant. It's nothing to do about success we all desire to have in our life. No, Jacob has been successful in his life all along. He had a lot of wealth, but he did not live according to the covenant of God. And that's the same challenge for us. Sometimes it is okay not to be successful according to the eyes of the world. But we can live according to the covenant of God. And that's where we need to be. That's where we need to be. So hopefully, Jacob's stories not only teach us how we are to hold on to our own faith in God and trust the covenant that has been given. That truth will set us free. Nothing else. Not the money, right? Not the degree. Not the fellow mankind either, right? The loved ones, too often bring pains. So hopefully we learn to depend on God who reigns over our lives. And more, that we trust God that the place that He is, that is where the eternity is. That's where the heaven is. And as long as we live with Him in this life, this turn into our own heaven. Right? Doesn't matter what struggle we have. Still, this is the heaven God is us. We sang the praise, right? He could not, wait for us to go up there, so He brought the heaven down. Christ came down to bring the heaven to us, and such a beautiful praise, and it is so true. He came down to save us. Yeah. So hold on to that faith we have, that God has done such things to free us from all the sinfulness and darkness, and so that we can free from all the burdens of this life. Okay? Let's pray.